Hey everyone, welcome back to my Python for Data Analysis series where we cover the essential Python skills you need to start working with data. I'm Urvi, I'm a data analyst, and today we're going to cover control flow. This includes things like if-else statements and loops, and this is a concept you will use a lot when analyzing data. Let's start with if-else statements. So sometimes we only want to execute certain lines of code if a certain condition exists. For example, we may want to filter our data set based on a certain condition. This is where if-else statements come in. So if we go over to our Jupyter notebook, as an example, let's say we are collecting ratings for a restaurant and we want to categorize each rating as bad or good. So this is where we can use an if-else statement. So let's say we have one rating and we will set that equal to 2. And we want to print out if that rating is above 3 or less than 3. So to do that, we can use our if statement. So we'll do if rating is less than or equal to 3. Remember, these are our arithmetic operators. We'll do a colon, and then we want to print rating is bad. Then we will do else print rating is good. So here, what the code will do is first it'll set rating equal to 2. Then it will check if the value of rating is less than or equal to 3. And if that is true, if it is less than or equal to 3, it'll print out rating is bad. Now, if this evaluates to false, which means if rating is above 3, this else statement will execute and it'll print rating is good. So we can run that. And we see rating is bad because rating equals to 2, which is less than or equal to 3. So this portion of the if-else statement printed. Now you can also see if we set this to 5 and we run this again, we'll get rating is good because the else portion of the if-else executed since 5 is not less than or equal to 3. So this evaluated to false. Now with if-else statements, we're not just limited to evaluating one condition. We can actually evaluate multiple conditions and execute different code based on which condition is met. So let's say instead of just classifying a rating as good or bad, we wanted to classify a rating as good, bad, or neutral. This is where an if, elif, else statement comes in. Here we are going to evaluate more than one condition. So let's again set rating equal to 2, and we'll do a similar thing. We'll do if rating is less than or equal to 2 this time, then we are going to print rating is bad. Now before we went directly to the else, instead here we are going to do elif, which is where we can specify another condition. So we will do elif rating equals 3. We will print rating is neutral. And finally, we'll have the else here where we will print rating is good. So now when this code executes, we'll first check is rating less than or equal to 2. If it is, we'll print rating is bad. If not, then we will evaluate is rating equal to 3. If it is, then we'll print rating is neutral. And then if neither of these conditions are met, then this else block will execute, which is rating is good. So here's a question for you. Will the if, elif, or else statement print when rating is equal to 2? Well, when we run this, we get rating is bad because rating is equal to 2, so this first if statement executes. Now, if we change this to 3, you'll see that now rating is neutral executed because this statement ended up being true. I will also mention here that as this code runs, this code will execute the first if or elif statement that is true. So like if rating is less than or equal to 2, this will print, and then it won't even check if it's equal to 3 or even check for this else statement. It'll just stop executing after it finds that rating is less than or equal to 2. So when you're doing if, elif statements, that's something to remember. This will execute sequentially, and when one of these is evaluated to true, the rest of the if, else, if statement is skipped. The last thing I'll cover about if-else statements is that if-else statements can also use booleans or strings in the conditions as well. They don't just have to be numbers and like arithmetic operators. So let's say instead of a number, our rating is a string. Let's say rating equals good. We can do if rating equals good, then print rating is good, else print rating is not good. So here we'll get rating is good because rating is equal to good. And if rating equals anything other than good, if we even put like good 1, we'll get rating is not good because this else is a catch-all for anything that doesn't meet this condition. And quickly, I'll show you an example of using a Boolean. Let's say we have a variable called rating is good, and that's a Boolean of true or false, and we'll set it to true. Then here we can do if rating is good, then we'll print rating is good, else we'll print rating is bad. Now when we run this, we see that rating is good because rating is good is equal to true. Now here, since this is already a Boolean variable, you don't have to do like is rating is good equal true. You can do that and it'll still work, but this will already evaluate to if true because rating is good is true. If we set this to false, you'll see the else statement prints because this is now false. Next, let's move on to loops. Sometimes, actually a lot of times, we want to run a number of lines of code over and over again, either for a set number of times or as long as a certain condition holds. In the first case, where we want to run code a certain number of times, we use for loops. And in the case where we want to run code as long as a condition holds, we use while loops. So let's start with for loops. So in the example above, we are just checking the value of a single rating, but most of the times you're gonna have more than one rating, right? So this is where the loops come in. Let's define ratings as a list, and here we'll give it the values of 3, 5, 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, 5. So here we have a list of 8 ratings. So now we can loop through each of these ratings and check if they're good, neutral, or bad. Now we'll define our for loop. So here we have for rating in ratings, colon, and then we'll execute code. So real quick, let me just go over what each of these words in this loop mean. For is a keyword that indicates to Python that you are starting a for loop. Rating is a placeholder for each item in the ratings list. And you can name this anything. It doesn't have to be rating. It can be for item in ratings. It can even be like for X in ratings. But I normally like to do like the singular version of like a variable that has like a plural name, right? So for one rating in ratings. In is the keyword that is used to iterate through a collection, and ratings is that collection. In other words, it is the list we are going to iterate through. And so now we'll actually just copy this code that we used when we just had one rating, and we'll put it inside the for loop. And we'll make sure our indentation is correct. And there we go. Now for each rating in ratings, it'll go through and it'll evaluate this if, elif, else. So first it'll evaluate this for rating 3, then it'll evaluate where rating is 5, then it'll evaluate it when rating is 1, and so on for all the items in this list. And I will note real quick that you don't have to put if, elif, else statements within the for loop. You can put any code you want in here, just the code you want to run for every single item in a list. So we'll run this real quick and you'll see how this executes. So first, ratings is equal to 3. So here, for the first iteration of this loop, rating is equal to 3. So it comes in and it checks, is 3 less than or equal to 2? No. Is 3 equal to 3? Yes, it prints that. Rating is neutral, and it goes on to the next iteration of the loop where rating is 5. So this else statement executes and we get rating is equal to good, and then it moves on to rating is equal to 1 and keeps executing from there. Now, since we're in the topic of for loops, let's cover the functions enumerate and zip. You're going to see this a lot in your data analysis code. So first, let's start with enumerate. Enumerate is a way to loop through both the list and its corresponding index. If you remember from the list video, each item in a list has its own index, and sometimes you want to access that index and the list item at that index at the same time, and enumerate allows us to do this. We might do it for things like debugging or skipping certain rows or comparing current and previous values. So here is an example. So let's say for ratings, we want to find what the rating is and that index value it's at. So we would do for And before we just had rating here as the placeholder for each item in the list. Well, now with enumerate, it's going to return both the index and the item at the list. There's two items we're now going to get in each iteration of the for loop. So for that, we can specify two placeholder variables here. One will be I, that's for the index, and then we'll do rating again. Then we'll do in like we did before, and this is where enumerate comes in. We will specify the enumerate function, and to enumerate, we will pass ratings. So ratings will be enumerated. We'll get the index and the rating at that index. So we do our colon again, and this time we won't do like an if else, we'll just keep it simple. We'll just print out the index and the element at the index so you can see how these loops are functioning. So we'll do a formatted string, and we'll do index. This is where I comes in, so we'll put in that index value, and then we'll do contains, and then rating. So for each iteration of this loop, we'll print out what the index is at that iteration of the loop and what is contained at that index. So if we run this, you'll see we get index 0 contains 3, index 1 contains 5, index 2 contains 1. And if you go up here, you can match that up here. This is index 0, which is 3, index 1, which is 5, index 2, which is 1. And you can see how it iterated through both the index and the value at that index. Now next, let's look at zip. Zip is used when you want to iterate through more than one list. So one use case of this might be comparing values of one list to another list at the same index position. So let's look at a quick example, and let's say for our use case, this first ratings list is like the initial ratings for a restaurant in like month 1, and let's say month 2 the restaurant improved some stuff and they took their ratings again, and we'll create another list called ratings updated, which will just contain ratings for like those month 2 ratings, right? And our use case is we want to compare ratings to ratings updated to see if the ratings improved or got worse. So now let's define our for loop using zip. So again, we're going to do for, indicating to Python that we are doing a for loop. And now since we're going to iterate through two different lists, we want a placeholder variable for each item in both of the lists. So since we have two lists, we'll specify two placeholder variables. If you're comparing 3, 4, 5 lists to each other, you would just have that number of placeholder variables. So for 3 lists, it would be 3 placeholder variables. For 4 lists, 4 placeholder variables, and so on. So right now, since we have 2, we'll just do rating 1 and rating 2 in zip. This is where that function comes in. We'll pass it ratings, which was that first list, and then ratings updated, which is the second list. So on the first iteration of this loop, rating 1 will return the first value in ratings, which is 3, and ratings 2 will contain the first value in ratings updated, which is 5. So these will correspond to the order that we specify the lists in zip. And now I'm just going to do an if statement here. So we'll do if rating 1 is less than rating 2, which means the initial rating is less than the updated rating, then we'll print that the rating improved. Elif rating 1 is equal to rating 2, which means the original rating is equal to the updated rating. We'll print rating maintained, and else we'll just print rating worsened. And just so you can see how these are working, for each iteration of the for loop, I'll actually print out rating 1 and rating 2. All right, so when we run this, you'll see for the first iteration of the for loop, we got rating 1 is 3 and rating 2 is 5 because those are the first elements in both of these lists. And then the if else statement ran for that, and we saw rating improved because at first it was 3 and in the second list it's 5. And you can kind of go through this output and see how each of these lists are iterated through when we use zip. Now, some things I want to note about zip is that, like I mentioned before, you can use more than 2 lists here. You can use as many lists as you want. And if these lists are not the same size, this for loop will only run for as long as the shortest list, so that you don't get any like index out of bounds errors. So if ratings was only like 5 elements long, but ratings updated is 8 elements long, you'll only get 5 iterations of this for loop. And finally, let's go over while loops. Now, if you don't know exactly how many times you want to iterate over something, or you don't have a collection like a list or a tuple or something like that to iterate over, but you know you want to run a certain set of code while a certain condition holds, you can use a while loop. One use case of this could be like reading in sensor data. Let's say you have like a thermometer that you're taking readings of, and let's say you only want to take readings as long as the temperature is below 80 degrees. That's a condition. Temperature is less than or equal to 80, and that's where a while loop would come in. So let's actually take a look at the code for that example. So there's going to be a bit of code here, and I don't want you to get scared seeing all that code. I really just want you to focus on the syntax of the while loop. I'm actually going to just copy all that code over here. So here I'm importing a library called random. I'm then setting a Boolean variable equal to true. And now this is the part I want you to focus on, the while loop. This is where we're defining the loop. Now, before when we were using a for loop, the for keyword indicated to Python that we're doing a for loop. If you want a while loop, you use the while keyword that indicates to Python that you want to use a while loop. And then you can specify a condition here. So here we're doing while keep reading, which means while true. So as long as keep reading equals to true, this code will execute. Now you don't have to worry too much about what's in this code. This line is just generating a random number. That's what I'm doing to like simulate reading a temperature, because I don't have an actual thermometer that we're reading temperatures from. And then I'm just printing what ran temp contains. And then here's our if statement where I'm just checking if ran temperature is greater than or equal to 80. You can print that it is at or above 80 degrees. And then we're setting keep reading to false. So that once this evaluates to true, once we set keep reading to false, the next time this while loop evaluates, it'll evaluate to while false, and it will not run the rest of this code. So that's how we are only running the code while keep reading is true, while this condition holds. So if we run this, you'll see it ran X number of times. So we have first a random temperature was 37, then it was 20, then it was 45, then it was 85, where we printed temperatures at or above 80, temperature is equal to 85. Keep reading was set to false, and that's why we don't have anything else printed, because when the while loop iterated after that, it said while false and stopped running. Now, the last thing I want to cover when it comes to loops are the keywords of break and continue. These are two keywords you'll see quite a bit. So break stops the execution of the loop, and continue stops the current execution of the loop and starts the next execution of the loop. So I'll quickly show you an example of break. So let's go back to our example that we had here. Now, we wanted this while loop to stop once ran temperature is greater than 80. And to get the while loop to stop, we set keep reading to false so that this loop would not execute the next time. Now, instead of that, what we can do is we can actually just replace this with break. And what that will do is once ran temperature is greater than 80, it'll print that value of ran temperature, and then break will happen, which means that the code will break out of this while loop entirely. And you can see that if we print line after while loop. If you print this, you'll see we got a few random readings, then reading was above 96, so we printed temp at or above 80. Then we hit this break statement, which means the next iteration didn't even evaluate. It just broke out of this loop entirely and then printed the next line in the sequence, which was a line after while loop. So if you ever want to stop the execution of a loop, this works for both the while loops and the for loops. You can just use the break keyword. Now, in contrast to that, we have the continue keyword, which will continue to the next iteration. And the best way I think to show this is with a for loop. So let's go back to our case where we were iterating through the index and the values of that ratings list. So I'm going to copy this, paste it down here. So right now we are printing every index and what it contains, right? But let's say for index value 4, we don't want to print anything and we just want to go on to the next iteration of the loop. What we can do, if I equals 4, continue. So you'll see what happens here. When we run this, we'll see we get index 0 printed, index 1 printed, index 2 printed, index 3 printed, And then we get index 5 printed. And you'll see index 4 is missing. And that's because when the index was equal to 4, Python executed this continue, and this was all skipped and it just went to the next iteration where the index was equal to 5. So that's how you can use continue to skip certain iterations of a for loop or a while loop. All right, so those are the basics of control flow in Python. We covered if-else statements with just one condition and if-else statements with multiple conditions. We covered for loops, while loops, and the continue and break keywords. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, I would really appreciate it if you considered subscribing to the channel and liking the video. That really helps me know that you're enjoying the content and that it's useful to you. In the next video, we will dive into functions and code reusability, so definitely stay tuned for that one. Hope to see you there. Bye!